It was 6:45 in the morning when the CH-47 Chinook dropped into the landing zone at Forward Operating Base Joyce. The rotors threw up a wall of dust that blurred the edges of everything. Concrete barriers, Humvee tires, and tent canvas all wore the same tan coat. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter stepped out of the rotor wash and kept moving, her boots steady in the swirling grit. She carried a rucksack that looked heavier than she did and a rifle case marked with transport stickers from Bagram. Her OCP sleeves were streaked with dust before she reached the tarmac edge. A few sailors from the attached Navy element worked nearby, unloading crates from a flatbed. One of them glanced at her subdued patch that read, "Sniper," above her name tape, then looked away with a half smirk. The look said more than words. They probably thought she was an intel tech or optics support, maybe here to fix a system or run data. Emily didn't react. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder and walked toward the operations tents with the same quiet precision she carried on a rifle range. The air around the FOB was heavy with diesel and the low hum of generators. In the distance, someone shouted over a radio, and a convoy rumbled toward the north gate. The world here was movement and noise, but she slipped through it without hurry. Her steps were measured, her face calm. No one offered to help with her gear, and she didn't expect them to. As she passed between rows of HESCO barriers, the haze from the helicopter slowly settled. The sun hadn't broken through yet, leaving the valley washed in gray light. Emily paused for a moment near a stack of water pallets, taking in the smell of dust and jet fuel. Then she kept walking toward the TOC. The base came alive around her, but no one called her name. She didn't need them to. She was exactly where she belonged, even if no one else saw it yet. It was 7:15 in the morning when the Tactical Operations Center filled with the low hum of air conditioning and the rustle of papers. The room was dim, lit mostly by the glow of a digital map stretched across one wall. SEAL Team 8's Neptune element sat clustered around a folding table, sleeves rolled, faces drawn from too many deployments. Chief Petty Officer Logan Pierce stood at the head, arms crossed, his focus locked on the mission overlay. The smell of coffee and dust mixed with the metallic tang of gear. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter entered quietly, carrying her tablet and a printed threat overlay tucked under her arm. She took a place near the back, behind two operators leaning forward on their elbows. The Navy lieutenant at the front ran through the plan in clipped, practiced language. Infiltration from Cop Reaper before dawn. Dismount at the bridge. Move to grid 42 Sierra Victor 8, 345. Target building Bravo 3 for search and sensitive site exploitation. The team nodded through each step, every man tracking details that had already become muscle memory. Emily waited for the pause that never came. The lieutenant moved on to exfil routes. Time on target. And expected resistance. The screen showed the valley she had studied all night, and her eyes went straight to the dry wadi snaking toward the compound. She raised her hand slightly, her voice even when the operations captain nodded for her to speak. She pointed to the wadi and explained what ISR footage from 2 nights ago had shown movement near that choke point. 2 armed fighters had been using it for overwatch. Hewlett from weeks earlier confirmed it as a likely ambush site. The room went still for a second. Logan turned his head just enough to glance at her, then back at the map. A quiet laugh came from one of the petty officers near the front. Logan's voice followed, low and flat. "We've run that route twice. If it's hot, we'll adjust. We don't need intel playing warfighter." No one spoke after that. The lieutenant cleared his throat and moved the briefing forward. The wadi erased from the screen a moment later. When it was over, Emily stepped forward and placed a copy of her overlay on the table. Logan barely looked at it. She folded the paper, slid it back into her binder, and left the tent without a word. Outside, the sun was climbing over the mountains, and the base buzzed with movement. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes were set. She knew better than to chase validation in a room full of noise. Out there, Respect had to be earned in silence, one shot at a time. It was 11:30 in the morning when Staff Sergeant Emily Carter reached the top of the ridge overlooking the valley. The climb had been slow and deliberate, her steps measured against the loose shale and thin air. 60 pounds of gear pressed into her shoulders, the weight familiar rather than burdensome. She stopped long enough to steady her breathing, scanning the landscape below where the compound sat like a pale mark against the dust. The wind moved lightly across her face, dry and constant from the west. She chose her position along a narrow ledge carved by erosion, the kind of spot that swallowed a person whole if they knew how to sit still. From her pack, she unpacked the Barrett MRAD chambered in .300 Norma Magnum, checking the action before locking in the bolt. The Night Force ATAC-R optic was mounted tight, the lens caps tucked into her sleeve pocket. She extended the bipod legs, planting them deep into the ground until the rifle settled like part of the terrain. The Kestrel 5700 came next, numbers flickering across its small screen as she noted air density and wind speed. Her range card was already filled with distances she had memorized from satellite images. She marked grid 42, Sierra Victor, 8, 3, 4, 5, penciling in adjustments for 1,000 meters. A thin piece of dental floss taped to the barrel moved just enough to confirm the wind direction. Every movement had purpose. Every breath was part of the routine. She wrote her data on a laminated dope card, clipped it near her scope for quick reference, then slipped on her gloves. The camouflage came together from what the ridge offered. A strip of jute netting, a few branches, a sprinkle of dust from the hillside. She became a shape the valley wouldn't notice. She checked her hydration, took a slow sip from her Camelback, and keyed her radio once on the Overwatch frequency. The net stayed quiet. No one used her name. That was fine. Silence was the language she understood best. As the sun pressed down and the world slowed to heat and distance, her focus narrowed to the glass. Respect, she thought, wasn't something anyone gave. It was something you earned, one perfect shot at a time. By late afternoon, the ridge had gone quiet. The sun stretched long shadows across the valley, and the air shimmered with heat that felt baked into the rocks. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter lay behind her rifle, motionless except for the slow rhythm of her breath. Hours had passed since she last moved her head. The weight of the Barrett pressed into her shoulder, the bipod anchored deep into the shale. Every small shift was measured, every muscle locked into endurance. She tracked the valley in small arcs, scanning known approach routes, watching dust trails fade into silence. Her range card was already covered in notes, choke points, tree lines, walls that could hide movement. Every 30 minutes she rechecked the grid, making minor adjustments for temperature and wind. Her neck ached from staying prone too long, but she managed it with small micro-movements, barely visible twitches that kept blood flowing without breaking her silhouette. The radio cracked occasionally, just short status bursts from other units. She responded with 2 words at most. Nothing unnecessary. She took slow sips from her Camelback, careful not to drain too much too soon, and ate half a protein bar softened by the heat. She didn't unwrap it fully, keeping the sound low and sealing it again before sliding it back into a Ziploc bag. Scent carried, and scent meant risk. As the light faded, the wind picked up, sweeping across the rocks in soft gusts. Emily adjusted her scope for twilight and checked her notes again. The valley below turned from gold to gray. Her father's voice echoed faintly in memory, teaching her about stillness on a range years ago. Wind doesn't care who you are, he used to say. It only rewards patience. She let that thought settle as the night took hold. The SEAL team moved somewhere far below, invisible in the dark, unaware of the eyes watching over them. Emily stayed silent, steady, and unseen. In that silence, she became part of the landscape, invisible but vital, the calm before the storm. At 4:44 in the morning, the valley finally shifted. Through the Night Force ATAC optic, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter caught the faintest movement near the split boulder on the east ridge. An RPG gunner knelt low, his assistant dragging a warhead into position. Farther up, two men with a PKM light machine gun adjusted their angle for a crossfire. The SEAL element below had just moved behind a rusted BTR hull, unaware that the kill zone was about to close on them. Emily's breathing slowed as the rest of the world narrowed into the reticle. She checked her dope card. Distance, 940 meters. Wind, 5 knots, left to right. Temperature drop from the night meant a slight change in density altitude. She made the correction. 0.2 mil hold left. The words of the rules of engagement flashed in her head. Do not engage unless American lives are in imminent danger. Then, the RPG assistant lifted the tube into place, and she knew the decision was already made. Her finger settled on the trigger shoe. One slow inhale. The exhale lasted until it met the brake. The Barrett MRAD bucked gently against her shoulder, the suppressed crack echoing once across the valley. Through the scope, she saw the RPG gunner drop, his upper chest torn open. The assistant froze. Then he turned to run. Her second shot caught him before he cleared the rock. He collapsed in a puff of dust that drifted into the dawn light. The PKM team reacted next, trying to reposition. Emily shifted her hold, tracking their movement. One man ducked behind a slab of stone. She fired just as he leaned to fire back. The impact lifted him off his knees. His partner reached for the gun, and she sent another round into the rock beside him. The fragment ricochet caught him in the face. Silence followed, but only for a second. Then scattered bursts of small arms fire came from the far tree line. She worked the bolt with clean efficiency. Bolt up, mag out, new mag in, bolt forward, safety off. She scanned left, identifying muzzle flashes in the dim light. 3 figures sprinted across a dry wash. Her crosshairs followed the first squeeze. One dropped. The second veered off toward cover. She aimed low, striking the dirt just in front of him. The round skipped into his legs, folding him instantly. The third froze, unsure of the direction of the shots. Her next round found him before he decided. Her radio crackled with urgency. Neptune. Actual down. We need cover for medevac. Without hesitation, Emily replied, already moving the rifle an inch at a time. Copy. You're covered. She tracked new movement along the north wall, where another group tried to flank the SEALs. She aimed for the rock edge, using a controlled ricochet to strike the man hiding behind it. His weapon clattered down the slope. The others dove for cover, unaware that there was none left. Each shot became a rhythm. Breathe, fire, bolt, reacquire. Her calm never wavered. Dust kicked from each impact, echoing off the canyon. In less than a minute, every position that had been firing went still. The SEAL team moved again, dragging their wounded toward the exfil point. Over the radio came their last call. Moving. 15 seconds to exfil. Keep them off us. Emily's reply was steady. Copy. Keep moving. She stayed behind the scope until the last silhouette disappeared into the ridgeline shadow. The rifle barrel smoked faintly in the cold morning air. Around her, the valley was still again. Her pulse never rose above resting. She chambered one final round, scanning for movement, then keyed her radio once more to confirm the area was clear. She hadn't broken orders. She'd simply refused to let the story end the wrong way. By 6:25 in the morning, the sound of rotor blades had faded into the distance. The medevac Blackhawk was gone, leaving only the whisper of wind rolling across the valley floor. The air was thick with dust and the metallic scent of spent brass. A few soldiers moved in silence, collecting gear and empty water bottles near the talk. Beyond the perimeter, smoke still drifted from the ridge where the firefight had ended hours earlier. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter sat on a folding chair beside a weathered table, her Barrett M-Rad broken down in front of her. Each motion was slow, deliberate, and exact. She pulled a bore snake through the barrel, wiped the bolt face clean, and brushed away the last traces of carbon. The routine grounded her. After 24 hours awake, her eyes burned and her hands trembled just enough to notice. She didn't fight the fatigue. She worked through it, one movement at a time. Chief Petty Officer Logan Pierce limped toward her, helmet dangling from his hand, a bandage wrapped around his head, streaked with dust and dried blood. He stopped a few feet away and said nothing for a moment, looking at her rifle more than her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, carried by the kind of exhaustion only combat gave. Said he was wrong about her. She didn't look up, just kept running the cloth through the bolt. Her answer came quiet, even. It was never about being right. It was about bringing you home. Logan nodded once, slow and heavy, then turned back toward the tents. No salute, no handshake, just understanding. The valley settled into silence again. A light breeze lifted the edge of her range card, still pinned under a small rock. Emily reassembled the rifle piece by piece, her face unreadable. The sound of the metal clicking together was steady and sure. The storm had passed, and all that was left was the calm that followed it. At 7:30 in the morning, the administrative tent was quiet except for the faint buzz of a ceiling fan and the shuffle of papers. Staff Sergeant Emily Carter sat across from Colonel Danner, her posture straight, her uniform still streaked with dust from the valley. The colonel flipped through a stack of folders on the table, each stamped with red labels and dotted with casualty notes, mission summaries, and field reports. He paused on one form, reading the typed words for the Silver Star recommendation. His tone carried both disbelief and respect when he finally spoke, describing what she had done alone on that ridge. He explained that higher command wanted to make it official, to bring her to Washington for a public ceremony. A clean story to highlight. Emily listened quietly, her hands resting on her knees. When he finished, she shook her head once, polite but certain. She asked for the award to be processed quietly. No cameras, no speeches. The colonel blinked in surprise, the corner of his mouth twitching into something between respect and understanding. He nodded, signed the form, and slid it to his adjutant without another word. The tent fell into stillness again. Outside, voices murmured near the motor pool, but inside, the air felt suspended. Recognition in war rarely came in the moment. It lived in after-action reports, in quiet words shared between units, in the stories that never left the walls of a talk. Her name didn't need to be spoken for her work to be known. Weeks later, the SEAL team's report reached Joint Command. It credited her Overwatch precision with saving Neptune element under fire. Instructors and team leaders started asking quietly about her, wanting to know if there were others like her. The phrase began appearing in messages between commands. We need another Carter. No legend, no headlines, just a standard competence, calm, and quiet excellence that spoke louder than any medal ever could. Several weeks after the mission, the story of the ambush in Kunar Province began to circulate through SOCOM's internal channels. It wasn't a headline or a press release, just a quiet mention in briefings and email threads. The after-action reports detailed how a lone Army sniper had covered SEAL Team 8's retreat, neutralizing multiple enemy positions and preventing further casualties. Commanders reading the report noticed the name, and instructors at Fort Moore's sniper school started receiving messages from Joint Task Forces. The question was always the same. Do we have any more graduates like her within months? The phrase started showing up in conversations and subject lines across commands. We need another Carter. It wasn't said loudly. but it carried weight. Inside SOCOM headquarters, new guidance began to take shape. The section on sniper attachments for joint operations was quietly revised. The line that once referenced gender was removed, replaced by a single standard based on qualification and performance. The change didn't make the news, but inside the community, everyone knew what it meant. It wasn't about inclusion. It was about results earned in the field. By her next deployment, Emily was no longer the outsider. She led a 3-woman Overwatch element attached to rotating special operations teams. Their missions were real, not demonstrations or tests. When she walked into a briefing now, operators handed her their route plans, asked for her wind calls, and listened when she spoke. Respect had replaced skepticism. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened because she showed what competence looked like under fire. Back home, the reports from her later tours read simple and unembellished. Mission complete. All personnel accounted for, success measured in silence. Her story never became a symbol, but it became something stronger proof that quiet excellence can change an entire system without ever asking for permission. It was late autumn when Staff Sergeant Emily Carter came home. The airfield was small, quiet, and half lit by the pale morning sun. She stepped off the transport plane carrying her rucksack and rifle case, her boots still coated with Afghan dust. The chill in the air hit her lungs in a way she hadn't felt in months. There were no cameras waiting, no banners hanging across the fence line, just the distant hum of a generator and the echo of her own footsteps across the tarmac. She walked slowly toward the terminal, the weight on her shoulders familiar but somehow heavier in peace than it ever was in combat. The stillness pressed around her. Every sound carried farther now, the scrape of gravel, the rustle of wind through the flag above the gate. She didn't look back at the plane. She had learned long ago that coming home wasn't about arrival. It was about learning to move quietly again. Later that week, she found herself at the base firing range. The tower at the far end still bore faded paint and rusted edges. On the inside wall, someone had stenciled a phrase in thick black letters. "Don't tell her she can't." Emily stopped for a moment, reading it, the corners of her mouth lifting into the faintest smile. She opened her rifle case and began assembling the Barrett MRAD piece by piece, the clicks and turns of metal fitting together, sounding like a language she never forgot. When the rifle was ready, she lay prone on the mat, aligned her scope, and let her breathing settle. One slow inhale, one steady exhale. The shot broke clean and crisp, the echo rolling across the empty field. As the sound faded, she lowered the rifle and looked downrange, calm and still. Strength, she thought, was never about applause or medals. It was about showing up, staying steady, and hitting the mark when it mattered most. In the end, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter's story was never about glory or recognition. It was about the kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real, the quiet professionalism that keeps others safe, the discipline that outlasts doubt, and the calm that holds steady when everything else breaks. She proved that courage isn't found in shouting the loudest, but in showing up, prepared and unshaken. When the moment comes, what she carried was more than a rifle. It was patience, clarity, and a belief that actions speak louder than appearances. Her lesson was simple. Don't judge by what you see. Watch what people do. Listen longer. Doubt slower. In a world that often mistakes volume for value, her silence became its own kind of power. And maybe that's what real strength looks like. Quiet, steady, and always ready when it matters most.